the apex predator of the Arctic, feared by everything else, the polar bear. After being forced to land due to a helicopter malfunction, Sergey Ananov found himself near the jaws of this ferocious animal during his 2-day ordeal in the Arctic. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying polar bear attack on Sergey Ananov. Welcome to Final Affliction. Being the largest carnivorous land animal on the planet, polar bears are unstoppable. They have no known predators other than their own kind and humans equipped with guns. They are fast, strong, excellent swimmers, and great hunters. Although attacks on people are sporadic, there have been numerous instances in the past where polar bears have hunted and killed people. After setting 5 world aviation records, Sergey found himself contemplating another run. It was there again in the back of his mind, an incessant gnawing that got more prominent at night, the familiar call to adventure. However, this time Sergey wanted something different, something that would set him apart from the rest, a legacy that would echo through time. In 2013, Sergey broke 2 world records that had stood for more than 50 years, flying the Robinson R-22 helicopter for 1,232 kilometers from Moscow to Ufa, breaking the record for the most distance without landing. From there, he broke the most distance over a closed circuit record by flying 1,062 kilometers in Moscow. Some people are simply born different. They're the ones with fires housed in their chests. The people who try to capture lightning in a bottle. These men wanted to become the first at something. Sergey was undoubtedly one of these people. He wanted to be the first person to complete a solo flight around the world in a small helicopter weighing less than 1 metric ton. There had only been one successful attempt at circumnavigating the world in a helicopter. However, the run involved a support aircraft trailing behind to prevent mishaps, carrying extra fuel and supplies. Additionally, it was done in a larger, sturdier helicopter. The R-22 was a small aircraft used for training and patrolling, microscopic tasks compared to circumnavigating the globe. To say this was a challenging endeavor is an understatement, even downright absurd. There was a reason nobody had done it before. On June 13, 2015, Sergey took flight from an airfield at Shevlino, Russia, a few miles from Moscow. He expected the entire trip to be smooth sailing, and just like that, the quest of circumnavigating the globe was underway. The first order of operation was to cross Siberia. After just 6 days of flying, Sergey reached Yakutsk on Wednesday. At this point, he had already completed more than 55 hours of flying, with a distance of more than 8,500 kilometers. Eventually, Sergey reached Canada and crossed the Hudson Strait toward Iqaluit, the Nunavut Territory's Inuit capital. He intended to fly to Greenland that morning. However, something was amiss with the weather conditions. No matter, he thought, he was near the end goal after all. Suddenly, things went terribly wrong. Sergey's helicopter malfunctioned as he flew over the tiny slither of freezing ocean between Canada and Greenland, called the Davis Strait. Due to the thick fog, he struggled to see what was happening. He could only hear the ominous sputtering that echoed through the deafening Arctic silence. Knowing the helicopter like the back of his hand, Sergey realized something had gone awry. The belt that connected the engine's power to the rudder blades had broken. Looking at the rapidly decreasing manifold pressure gauge, Sergey's face lost color. The helicopter's speed followed suit, and eventually the helicopter turned towards the Earth. Falling at approximately 17 feet per second, Sergey headed toward an ice floe, the size of a basketball court. However, he realized he wouldn't make it. He maneuvered the helicopter towards its side, tilting to the left to smash the blades against the frozen waters, safely skidding on the surface. Thanks to his world-class piloting, Sergey had landed unscathed. However, as the water entered, it took no time before he was chest deep inside the cockpit. He had to think fast and gather the most essential supplies he could, a raft. Yanking it with as much force as he could muster, Sergey swam to the surface and onto the nearest ice floe. Soaked to the bone, alone, and in the middle of nowhere, Sergey was in the worst place to be, in the kingdom of the Arctic King. Sergey's gaze strayed from the ice and over Davis Strait's turbulent open waters. A lightning bolt in his chest struck him. It was regret, and Sergey wanted to punish himself for his mistakes. However, there was no point, and he must get to work. Blowing up the life raft, Sergey lay beneath it, shielded against the wind. Hypothermia eventually reared its ugly head, making Sergey realize that all he could do was sit idly by and wait for rescue. Thankfully, Sergey's friend, a Russian-American named Andrei Kaplan, who was tracking Sergey's journey online, managed to call a pilot friend in Moscow. Thankfully, this initiated a call to the Joint Rescue Coordination Center in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Dispatching 2 C-130 Hercules aircraft, the search for Sergey began. However, the middle-aged Russian pilot did not know any of this. He could only hope his GPS managed to send his location before sinking into the frozen depths of the Arctic. However, as vital as it was, the GPS was the least of Sergey's problems. Right now, unbeknownst to him, a sinister force brewed nearby. Standing almost 10 feet, the polar bear waved its head back and forth, picking up the air for the scent of its prey. The massive beast knew well the scent of a whale carcass or a ringed seal moving underneath the ice. However, this time it picked up the unfamiliar signature of a defenseless Russian stranded on an ice floe. After spending nearly 4 hours on the ice, Sergey was conserving his energy inside the life raft. Suddenly, he heard the sound of heavy breathing followed by the ominous crunching of snow. He peeked out from under the raft, seeing a small slither of the outside world. There it was, in plain and perfect view, a massive polar bear a few feet away. It glistened from head to toe after swimming from floe to floe. Sergey's heart sank to his stomach. Suddenly, his fingers felt fiery, hot, preparing him for a fight. It was absurd, he thought. A rush swept over him and he tried his best not to scramble in fear. Sergey hid beneath the raft, hoping the polar bear found him uninteresting. It did the opposite. The massive creature paced towards Sergey with that distinct predatorial gait. The bear got so close to Sergey that he could see the ridges in its black footpads. At this point, Sergey thought he would surely die. However, the hardened pilot would rather be felled kicking and screaming. With a primal rush, Sergey sprang from the raft, flailed his arms as high as he could, and rushed towards the beast. He screamed with such ferocity, he almost couldn't recognize his own voice. Sometimes, bravery pays off. The bear got terrified of Sergey, and it jogged away from him. Sergey chased the beast off until the floe's edge, prompting the bear to nimbly launch itself toward a neighboring slab of ice. It gave Sergey a look with its black, beady eyes before heading back into the mysterious Arctic. Unfortunately, it would not be the last time Sergey would encounter these beasts. Later that same day, a helicopter whizzed past the ice. However, Sergey deemed it was at least a few miles away. Hidden in the thickness of the fog, he prevented himself from firing his last flare, as it would be impossible to see anyway. He clenched his teeth as the sound of rescue disappeared. Another bear visited him. Sergey implemented his previous tactic, and it worked. However, he had become worn out from the cold, exhaustion, and the lack of food and water. The day drifted into the afternoon. Sergey found a dip in the ice and placed his life raft on top, creating a waterbed. He closed his eyes and thought of his family, his wife Jane, and their children. Drifting closer to sleep, Sergey's senses were awakened by the familiar sound of crunching snow. A third bear walked past again, sniffing the air and trying to understand Sergey's signature. As it approached him, Sergey responded with what worked before. He bolted up, flailed his arms wildly, and screamed. The bear was scared away just the same. However, at this point, Sergey began thinking of ending his life. He could not fight off another bear, nor did he have the energy left to do so. Sergey drifted into slumber as night was arriving. He shivered in despair on the ice floe. Suddenly, Sergey could hear another helicopter. It was closer this time. Springing with all force he could muster, he grabbed his last remaining flare and shot it into the sky. With the sky clear now, the helicopter spotted the Russian pilot. Sergey could not have seen a more beautiful sight. He screamed, flailing his hands as high as he could, and with luck on his side, there were no bears in sight this time. Sergey was eventually rescued. Unlike the horror stories of the Arctic all too familiar to him, his case ended on a happier note. Sergey flew to Ottawa to sort out his documentation after losing his belongings, which included his passport in the crash. He eventually returned to Russia in the loving arms of his grateful wife and children. Sergey's case was rare. Getting lost in the Arctic usually ends poorly. Thankfully, the quick action of his friends, the rescuers, and Sergey himself allowed him to live on to tell the story of the day he narrowly escaped his final affliction.